Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to talk about this. This is something that everybody wants to know about. I bet it's a question every EducationUSA advisor is asked at some point. I'm Marta Carranza. I'm an EducationUSA advisor in El Salvador. And this afternoon, we're going to talk about how to finance your graduate studies. We have two presenters this afternoon, as you know, Dr. James Monahan, and we also have Perla Cardenas from Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. First of all, I'm going to start by talking about EducationUSA. And EducationUSA is a global network of advising centers from the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, known as ECA. There are 56 EducationUSA advising centers in our region. It covers Mexico, Canada, Central America, and the Caribbean. And what we do is that we offer free access to introductory information on U.S. study. We mainly work with students, parents, of course, higher education institutions, governments, NGOs, and we provide unbiased, accurate, comprehensive information about the full range of accredited U.S. higher education institutions. As I said, we provide free advice and free services, and we do it in three ways. The first one is in center, when we're open. We offer information sessions at our centers, one-on-one and group advising sessions. We also offer workshops, and we have official materials and guides for studying in the United States, like TOEFL Prep, SAT Prep, GRE Prep. We have the guides in our offices. You can come to our offices and borrow the materials for you to prepare for the test. And for other, we have other types of materials, such as how to write an essay, and well, there is a variety of materials in our offices. We also do outreach. That means that we travel around our countries or our regions, and we offer information sessions at educational institutions like schools, universities. We also offer workshops, and we participate at mobility fairs in those institutions. And we also, the last one is virtual service. We offer one-on-one and also group advising virtual sessions. We offer webinars like this one. We participate in fairs. We're going to have a fair in September. We're going to talk about that at the end. And we also offer seminars. And there is an advising center. There is an EducationUSA advising office in every country, at least one. So make sure you contact the closest EducationUSA advising office or visit when we are open. Right now, we would like to know where you are joining us from. So we're going to have this poll. Please answer it. Excellent. You can see that we're almost done. We have people from North America, probably Mexico, Canada. We also have people from Central America, and we also have people from the Caribbean. 60% from North America, 30% from Central America, and 10% from the Caribbean. Thank you very much for answering the poll. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce our presenters. I'm going to read a short bio about Dr. Monahan. And Dr. James Monahan is the Director of Graduate and International Admissions at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. He oversees the recruitment of international students at the graduate and undergraduate level, and works closely with the university's academic leadership to establish partnerships and programs with international institutions. Dr. Monahan has over 12 years of experience in international education. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan, a master's degree from St. Louis University, and a doctorate of education from the University of Missouri, Columbia. He has worked with EducationUSA offices in several countries to assist international students seeking to further their education in the United States. And we also have Perla Cardenas that works at the same institution. I'm gonna read her bio. It says, Perla Cardenas joined the Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville Graduate and International Admissions team in November of last year. She holds a bachelor's degree from California State University at San Bernardino and a master's of business administration from Regent University. In her position as a program student advisor, Ms. Cardenas works to recruit international students and help them through the admissions process. She has held positions in higher education for more than 4 years and is instrumental in the university's diversity initiative. Ms. Cardenas is fluent in Spanish and works particularly closely with prospective students from Latin America. So let's welcome our dear friends from Southern Illinois University, and let's begin with the presentation. Dr. Monahan, welcome. Perla, welcome.
Thank you so much. We are very happy to be here. I appreciate the time. Let's see if back. Okay. Yeah, no, let's start with, I just want to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about today. I know that it's probably the most asked question that we always get whenever we're out speaking with students is about finances. What financial aid is available? Because we recognize that studying in the US is not inexpensive. It is a serious investment for you, and we want to help you. The US institutions realize that, okay? They're not just expecting you to be able to fully fund your education all on your own. So there are a lot of different opportunities for you. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over a couple of topics, starting with the costs, then go to scholarships, talk about scholarships, grants, and fellowships. Then I'll touch on graduate assistantships, which tend to be probably the largest, or one of the most important ways to fund your education. And then of course there's work study so that you can work while you're studying, internships, and OPT, which is a program that's available to you as an international student to work in the US. I will go over this. I will be speaking in English during this presentation. I'll stop at a couple of points in the presentation to let Perla help me out and give you a brief overview in Spanish in case that is helpful for some of you. So again, thank you very much for joining us. So let's get started. The first thing I'd like to talk about is, you know, you're probably out there looking at different schools, looking at different graduate programs, and trying to figure out how are you going to compare the cost of these different programs, right? They all have different tuition rates, they have different living expenses, they may have, the programs may be of different length. How are you going to know how much you need in order to afford to get into the program that you want? Well, all institutions in the US are required to publish an estimate for your I-20. The I-20 is the document that you'll receive that allows you to go get a visa interview at the US Embassy or Consulate. And every university must publish an estimated amount that they believe it will cost you for your education for one entire year, okay? And the items that go into that are the tuition, various fees, health insurance, you must have health insurance while you're in the US, and your living expenses. So we're calculating that on a yearly basis, and my recommendation to you is to look at the I-20 estimates provided by each institution and use that as a comparison, all right? And that will help you to better determine how much money, how much financial assistance you're getting, and how much it will actually cost you in the end. So, next slide, please. So what is a part of each of these? The first thing is tuition, and that's what you normally think of course. But tuition is really just the cost of the instruction, okay? So it is the cost to have a professor in front of you in a classroom teaching. And it is generally charged in the US on a per credit hour basis. Now, different classes will have different credit hour amounts, okay? But typically each class is 3 credit hours. That usually means you're going to spend at least 3 hours in the classroom. And at the graduate level, you'll normally take 3 classes per semester, so that's 9 credit hours this semester. Now, a typical master's program generally is about 30 to 45 credit hours for the entire program. So you can imagine if, say, a typical program is 36 credit hours and you take 9 credit hours a semester, you're going to complete that program in 4 semesters or 2 years, okay? So you will always be charged tuition at a per credit hour cost. In addition to your tuition, and some students get surprised by this, are fees for additional services that you get from the university. Primarily, it's for technology. When you're on campus, you're going to have free internet, you're going to have access to computers, you're going to have access to labs, you're going to have access to different services such as the library. And then, of course, even some recreational things like the fitness center, those kinds of things. It's one thing that the US does better than anywhere else in the world in terms of education. We provide you with a lot of extras. While going to school is the most important part, obviously, earning that degree, but we want you to be a well-rounded person as well. So we're going to provide a lot of opportunities for you, even at the graduate level, for physical activities, for culture, and many other things. And those costs are all covered in your fees, and then everything on campus is free to you, okay? Health insurance in the US is probably different than any other country. And as an international student, you are required to purchase health insurance. You cannot hold a student visa. You cannot be in the US without that health insurance. And it tends to be expensive. For example, our health insurance runs about $2,000 per year. That's pretty typical for schools. And you must remember that that is going to be a cost that you will have. The final item is living expenses, and these can vary greatly depending on whether you're on the East or West Coast. If you're in New York or California, your living expenses are going to be much, much higher than if you're in a place like Illinois, which is more in the middle of the country. Housing costs are higher, food is higher, those kinds of things. But we have to estimate how much your living expenses will be per year. And so we usually use a typical housing on campus. If you're living on campus, if you live off campus, it might be cheaper, but we include things like books, supplies, transportation for getting around, all those things, and we come up with an estimate. Many students say, hey, I can live less expensive than that, and that is true. You might be able to live for slightly less than what we estimate for your living expenses, but it's a good rule of thumb, and it's a good way for you to be able to compare, as we say, apples to apples. So compare school to school what your costs are actually going to be. Next slide, please. So I talked about some of these already, but just keep in mind when you're looking at expenses, there's going to be a difference between private and public tuition rates. If you go to a private school, the tuition tends to be much higher because at a public school, it is funded in part by the US government. We receive funding usually actually from the state. So the state of Illinois, us being a public institution, will get it. You may see different tuition rates for in-state and out-of-state students. So we're in Illinois. Maybe we may have one rate for people who live in Illinois and another rate for someone from California who wishes to come to go to school. Now at SIUE, we've actually eliminated that, and we just have a domestic rate and an international rate. But we do have an international rate, and that is typically much higher, and that's to make up the difference in the funding that we receive from the government, which is usually covered by people's taxes and those kinds of things. Also, when you're looking at different universities, most universities in the US work on the semester credit hour system, but There are some, particularly on the West Coast, we find, that work on a quarter system. So they actually have 4 quarters per year, whereas on the semester system, we just have 2 main semesters and then 1 sort of half a semester in the summer where you can take classes. But keep in mind, if they're, again, if you're looking at a class and it's saying per quarter hour, and it looks so much lower, well, that's because you're going to have a whole extra quarter that you're going to have to pay those additional fees. So be smart about how you compare the cost of your education. There are some fixed fees, you know, like I said, that you'll see. We just have a flat fee per credit hour, but sometimes labs with particularly expensive equipment, or if you're doing something like you're taking an art class, they may have a supplemental fee for supplies or laboratory fees, those kinds of things. You might see those on your bill as well. And I already talked about the fact that if you live on and off campus can make a difference. In general, schools estimate their living expenses based on on-campus housing, which tends to be slightly more expensive than off-campus. I would say at every school, however, if you guys are graduate students, you're going to be able to choose off-campus housing instead. Next slide, please. So here's a typical, this is our estimated I-20 costs. You can see we have to say per year, we're estimating you're going to take 18 credit hours a year. There's your tuition, fees, health insurance, and living expenses. In order to get that I-20, you're going to have to submit to us funding sources that show an amount equivalent to or greater than that total cost of $32,000. Now, that may be very high. So luckily, you can use a lot of different funding sources to reach that 32,000. Yes, your personal funds, you'll probably have a sponsor, which may be your parents. University scholarships, those can be deducted from that 32,000 amount. And if you have support from maybe a company or your government or an organization, those can all be taken out. So you need to combine all those sources to come up with the total estimated I-20 costs. Okay? Perla, would you like to give a brief overview of that in Spanish for us?
Yeah. So, lo importante de toda esta información es que el estudiante investigue el total costo anual al comparar universidades de su interés. So, cada universidad debe publicar su total costo anual en el I-20. El costo anual debe incluir el costo de la matrícula, las tarifas, el seguro de salud y los gastos de la vida estimados. So, eso incluye vivienda, libros, transporte, etc. So, si solo compara el costo por hora de crédito de las universidades, no se consideran los cálculos del costo total. So, nomás va a ser el costo del crédito por la hora. So, es importante que el estudiante vea todo el costo anual para tener las finanzas para sus costos que va a tener que presentar para venir a estudiar a los Estados Unidos. Aquí es un ejemplo, puede ver el costo de cada categoría y luego el costo total en rojo.
Okay, all right, next slide. So now let's talk about what you're really here for. You want to know about actually how do you pay for those funds, but it's really important that you have an overview of what the costs are when you're looking at the scholarship offers and financial aid offers that you're getting from various colleges and universities. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is scholarships, grants, and fellowships. You may hear these terms quite often and see these terms referenced quite often on university websites. And you may think to yourself, what's the difference? To be honest, the difference is not great, especially to you, but in general, a scholarship is something that's given directly from the university, and in general, it's based on either merit, so your academic standing, or possibly athletics. So you're going to be getting that, and it's just going to be based on your past performance. They'll be awarding you a scholarship. A grant, on the other hand, may have some particular stipulations. For example, if you got a grant from a government agency or from a nonprofit agency, they may require that you study something in particular. They may require that you contribute something upon completion of your studies to that organization. So they are giving you the money, but there may be some strings attached. And with those strings, you have to make sure that you do what they require of you, or they could ask you to repay the money, okay? But in general, it's nothing out of line and something that you should be able to handle as part of your education. Finally, fellowships are usually tend to be more service-based, for example. So they may ask you to contribute back to your community in exchange for helping fund your education, okay? So they, you know, it could be that you have to do some community service work, or it could be like an initiative that they're trying to promote with their nonprofit. So those are sort of the subtle differences between those three, but in general to you, it is money that you should not have to repay. And so these are obviously sought after by students such as yourself. Next slide, please. So what are the sources of these scholarships, grants, and fellowships? Basically, either they come from the university or they are externally funded, okay? At the university, we tend to have a couple of different areas where we give them. First would be academic scholarships. Those are sort of the most well-known, of course, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't say that they are, well, I would say, yeah, okay, they're probably the most popular as well, but there are many other different types of scholarships as well. But when you apply for academic scholarships, you're gonna have to show your transcripts, your grades. It could be based on a standardized test score as well, but it's usually entirely academically based. Athletic scholarships will be for you to participate on a team, in a collegiate team, what we call the NCAA or NCAA. It's the National Collegiate Athletic Association. They allow schools to give scholarships so that you are a member of the soccer or football team, for example, or the basketball team, or play tennis. You represent the university for those sports, and you get a scholarship in exchange for that. There are also, though, program and field of study. So a particular program, such as chemistry, for example, may have scholarships to award specifically for students in chemistry, and maybe even down into a particular area of chemistry, organic chemistry, for example. They may have gotten an endowment from a company or something like that that allows them to give these fellowships, grants, or scholarships out, but they're very specific to a particular field of study. And then we have, and these are, you're seeing more and more of these sort of demographic awards, or what we call diversity awards. And they are an attempt by universities to broaden the types of students that they get in an individual program. One clear example that we have, for example, we have a program called the GSA, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it is to reward students that are underrepresented in their field of study. So for example, women are not found very often in engineering. So these are designed to get more women to enter the field of engineering. So there are scholarships out there like that that you should watch for, okay? Those are offered by the university. Now, externally, you may get government-sponsored funding, and they could sometimes come from the US, or sometimes from your home country may have funding for you. But also you want to look for corporates and nonprofit organizations that may offer scholarships as well. I mentioned that women in engineering. I've got an example later on of a particular organization that wants to promote women in particular professions, and they offer scholarships. So that may be an opportunity for you to go. So next slide, please. So where do you find these? The first source is always the university's website, okay? Go out there, go out to their international admissions website, and go out to their financial aid websites, okay? of the universities that you are interested in. They will list them. We, for example, have a tab on our international admissions website that says costs and funding, and it'll explain to you just what we're talking about here, how much our costs are, and what are the options that the university offers to international students. Now, and also the financial aid websites will have funding as well. Now, I want to caution you, if you see the term FAFSA, or there's going to be certain funding that's only available to domestic US students, okay? And those are usually, that's funding that is provided by the government, whether it be the state government or the US government, and it's only available to US citizens. And those can also be loans, they can be a lot of different programs. If the scholarship or the fellowship or whatever says you need to file a FAFSA, which is F-A-F-S-A, strange term, it means it's the financial aid application. And so it's what US students use to get financial aid. So just be aware of that. They should, in most cases, university websites will clearly identify if a scholarship is available to international students because of these rules. And here I really want to give a plug to the EducationUSA offices. They have a ton of information. I've been to many of them around the world, and they are a wealth of information about different funding opportunities available to you. The largest is probably the Fulbright Scholarship that the US government offers. Those are managed basically by 3 large organizations, IIE, which is the International Institute of Education, LASPA, which is out of Harvard University, and Ahmed East. Now, Ahmed East is mostly in the Middle East. So I think if you did get a scholarship, it would be managed by IIE or LAPSAO. But if you're interested in Fulbright scholarships, you can go out. They have a searchable database on their website at foreign.fulbrightonline.org. You can pull down your country and see how to apply for those Fulbright scholarships there. Okay. There are a couple of other websites out there that are available for searchable websites. One that I know of well is called internationalstudent.com, and it lists a wide variety of scholarships and fellowships that are available to international students. So I do, yes, go ahead and look at those. One word of caution though, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is what we say in the US. If they're saying, I guarantee you a scholarship, that's not necessarily what they can do. If they're charging you, if they want money for them to search out a scholarship for you, please be skeptical of those kinds. The ones that are really trying to help you will have free databases. You may have to register for them, but it is obviously a valuable resource for you. And then look for nonprofit organizations. Most of them promote specific causes or groups. 2 big ones are the Rotary Organization and AAUW. That's the one that I was mentioning earlier. They offer scholarships to help women in particular professions. So go out and look at what we call nonprofit organizations, and you may find some scholarships that are available. Next slide, please. So last thing I want to mention is a couple of tips that you should think about when you're applying for these, because you'll oftentimes have to write an essay, you'll have to turn in a CV, those kinds of things to promote you, okay? And that's a really difficult thing to do. Although we may be proud, we don't want to come across as boastful, and so people struggle with this, and I understand that. But in these applications, you need to put your best foot forward and show people why you're deserving of those scholarships. Sometimes the scholarships will be cut and dried. What is your GPA? What kind of grades did you get in your undergraduate? But in other cases, they're looking for specific strengths. And I encourage you to really read the application carefully to see what they're asking for and see how your skills meet those requirements, okay? Think of your unique qualities. And something that I will say, most US schools, there are 2 big things that always look good on these. Number 1 is if you have any leadership experience. in your undergrad, when you're in high school, in your community, and any service that you've given to your community. So what have you done to help others? Those are two things that are just huge right now, and something that's very important that schools are looking for and funding sources are looking for. They want to award scholarships to students that are doing good in their community. And finally, you need to make sure you know your career aspirations, what you want to do with your life, and you need to be able to clearly explain how getting the degree you're going for will help you succeed in your career and in the world in general. So Perla, would you like to sort of summarize that in Spanish for me again?
Yeah. So, cuando estás aplicando para becas, debes escribir sobre sus aspiraciones profesionales, también las habilidades de liderazgo y el servicio comunitario es muy reconocido en los Estados Unidos. Las becas tienen diferentes ofertas, lo que significa que algunas pueden ser financiadas total en comparación en unas que no están financiadas no as parte. Por ejemplo, SIUE tiene una beca llamada CGA que cubre la matrícula y un sueldo mensual, pero no cubre las tarifas. Otro tipo de beca es la cantidad fija en comparación una tasa garantizada. La beca GEO que se ofrece en SIUE es uno de 50% de descuento para toda la duración de su programa, mientras nuestra beca GSA solo cubre la matrícula por 2 semestres. Eso no es para el total del programa, nomás para 2 semestres. Existen diferentes recursos para encontrar becas para estudiantes. Puede buscar en el sitio web de las universidades. Allí en las páginas de estudiantes internacionales tiene más información de las becas que ofrecen las universidades para los estudiantes internacionales. Y también comunicarse con EducationUSA para obtener más recursos que pueden tener para ustedes, para encontrar más becas, para apoyarlos a estudiar en los Estados Unidos. Thank you, Jim.
Next slide, please.
So now we have another poll, and please participate. Let us know if your CV or a statement of purpose include information on leadership skills and or service to the community. Okay, so most of you are saying yes, 83%. Some of you are saying no. We're going to give a couple of moments to people are still giving us their opinion. Okay, so here are the results. Thank you for participating.
Yes, that's interesting. It's good to hear that a number of you have already thought about this, but please, if you haven't, and do watch that, because it is something that's very important to universities and to people that are providing funding. So include that in there. It's not just academics that will get you these scholarships. So, okay. Next slide. Right. The polls in front of it. Okay. So just as sort of a recap, to go back and look at your costs and then how you're going to compare the scholarships that are offered. Remember to keep in mind, some scholarships are what they call full scholarships. I'll give you an example with SIUE. We have what's called a CGA, Competitive Graduate Award. It provides a full tuition waiver plus a monthly stipend, right? Sounds full, sounds great. Keep in mind, it does not include your fees. Now the stipend can help you pay you those fees, but it's always something to look at and think about very carefully when you do that. It's a great scholarship, but just, you know, it's an example of the kinds of things you need to keep in mind. Another one, I'm really proud, we offer a scholarship called the GEO Award. And what it is rather than telling you, oh, I'm going to give you $5,000 to help you fund your graduate school, it says, I'm going to give you 50% off your tuition, right? For the entire program. So therefore, different people finish their programs more quickly than others. So if someone says, I'm going to give you $5,000 a year, but it takes you 2 years to finish your degree, well, you're only going to get that $5,000 maybe for the first year. With the GEO, it's going to go on and it's going to be guaranteed for the entire length of your program. So you may want to watch for some of those because they can actually be a bigger savings to you in the end than a simple scholarship that someone advertises that says, oh, here's X amount of dollars to you, because it can really be beneficial to you. And then also watch if they're one-time or renewable. You know, sometimes we say, we have, for example, a GSA award, and it is a full tuition waiver, which is wonderful, but it's not renewable. It's only for 2 semesters. The purpose of this from our standpoint, just so you know, is it's students that maybe didn't get an assistantship. We feel they're really good students. It gives them the opportunity to come to our institution and for the first 2 semesters, and we believe in the admissions office, because we get to award these, that these students are bright enough that they're going to be able to get an assistantship for their next year or 2. So that's kind of why we do that. But it's something that you need to keep in mind when you're getting an offer from an institution. So go to the next slide, because this is a graduate assistantships, and that is something very important that I want to talk to you about. Graduate assistantships, I think, are probably the most common way that you're going to fund if you're looking for a full scholarship. And they are, I'm sorry, I just did it. So they are not scholarships, they are assistantships, okay? So there are going to be some expectations from you, but it is an excellent way to fund your graduate education. So go to the next slide and let me talk about some of the details of a graduate assistantship. So there are basically 3 types of graduate assistantships. Research assistantships, or RAs, teaching assistantships, or TAs, or general graduate assistants, which is a service type assistantship that we call GAs. They're all assistantships, they're just different things you're going to do. In most cases, assistantships will include a full tuition waiver, depending on the school. Some schools only waive part of your tuition, we waive the full amount, and usually they will provide you with a monthly stipend, which is essentially a payment to help you with your expenses each month, such as rent, utilities, food, those kinds of things. Now, so what this is, though, rather than a scholarship where you're just being given money, you have to work in exchange for this, okay? You are either going to help out a professor do their research in a lab, you're going to help them teach a class of undergraduates usually, or for example, we have a graduate assistant that works in our office, helps us with various tasks around the office. You will see these all around campus, so that's really important to remember as well. The most common, though, are coming from the area that you're studying in, and you're going to do research or help teach, okay? When you do this, you have to do it for 20 hours a week in general, and so you can't quite take as many classes as you would normally. So they lower your workload, so it generally takes a little bit longer for you to finish your degree, but of course in exchange you get the valuable research and teaching experience, and of course get good rebate on your tuition. You should apply to these. Well, there are many ways to apply, but in general, you're going to apply directly to the graduate program that you want it from, or the department that you want it from. Now, you normally have to have been admitted to the school before you are allowed to apply for an assistantship. So apply to the school first, get admitted into the program that you want, and then you can apply to that program for your assistantship. Next slide, please. So again, just like with scholarships, there are a couple of things you need to do to find a graduate assistantship. One, they're almost always going to ask you for your resume or CV. And you should highlight, again, your leadership skills, any teaching experience that you have, any research experience that you have. That's going to be helpful for you. If you're looking for an assistantship in your department, look through the professors that teach in that department and see what their research interests are. That will usually help you to determine if they have any grant funding available to hire assistantships. In addition, they're going to want to see that you are interested in studying the same thing that they're doing research in. So if you take civil engineering, for example, you may want to do water resource management. Well, if at the university that you're looking at, they do bridges and structures like that, that's not water resource management. So if you put together a personal statement that says, I'm really interested in water research management, that interest is not going to match the interest of the professors. So look through, all the professors will have a CV usually posted online that explains the type of research that they're doing. Look through those and see if you find a match. If you do, go ahead, email that professor. See if you can ask them for an assistantship. Don't be surprised though if they don't respond. Professors are very busy people. They won't always respond. There's usually someone that's an advisor in the particular department that's there to help you, and they will respond. But in general, it's hard to know. Don't take it personally, but go ahead and do that reach out. It cannot hurt you to do that. Finally, look for ideas outside of your academic department. Like I said, my office has a graduate assistantship. The library always has graduate assistantships. There are offices all over campus. Usually there's one centralized place where you can find these positions and apply for them online. Usually it's through the graduate school. So be sure to look at that and don't forget about those additional opportunities that could be out there. And again, make sure you follow the applications carefully and get admitted to the university before applying for the assistantship. Next slide, okay, actually, Perla, you want to talk briefly about assistantships in Spanish for us?
Yes, I can do that. So las asistencias de posgrado es un trabajo para estudiantes. So, una asistencia generalmente cubre el costo de la matrícula y un sueldo mensual. Los estudiantes trabajan a lo máximo 20 horas a la semana. Unos consejos para encontrar asistencias de posgrado es investigar los intereses de los miembros de la facultad para encontrar similitudes con sus aspiraciones profesionales de usted. Ponerse en contacto con el profesor o la profesora y preguntar sobre estas oportunidades también les ayudarán. También pueden buscar ayudantes en otros departamentos diferentes, no solamente en su programa o su departamento. So puede aplicar para asistencias en la librería, en otras oficinas sobre la universidad. Hay muchas oportunidades de asistencias para estudiantes, no solamente en el programa, pero si también quiere trabajar sobre su curso de programa, hay oportunidades para agarrar una asistencia en una oficina por un semestre, un año y ya luego tratar de agarrar una asistencia en su programa con su profesor o profesora también en el año que viene o algo así. So, hay diferentes oportunidades y se pueden aplicar en el sitio de web del Graduate School y aplicar nomás por ahí. Okay.
Okay, the last thing I want to go over quickly is work study and work experience opportunities. So next slide, please. Basically, US law allows you as a student to work up to 20 hours per week, but you must get this job on campus, okay? So you can't go outside of campus to work. Generally, these jobs pay about $8 to $15 an hour. It depends on the job, but most schools have many different opportunities available to you. So that is one thing that is open to all students, whether they be graduates or undergraduates at U.S. institutions. It's not going to pay for your entire education, there's no doubt about it, but it certainly can help you with your living expenses. So do keep in mind that as long as you meet that, there will be opportunities for you to work in the library, in various offices to help with office work, that kind of thing, that will help to fund some of your living expenses. So that is allowed under US law. Next slide, please. And then the two work programs that are available to international students are known as CPT and OPT. CPT and internships are pretty much the same. Although internships tend to be more unpaid, they will offer you the chance to gain some valuable work experience. A CPT is going to be part of your curriculum. So if you are in a business school, for example, you will have the opportunity to go work in a business, but it'll be one of your semesters and you'll actually earn credit for that. So it's built in, usually not paid as well. OPT, on the other hand, is something that you can do after you've been in school for at least 2 semesters, and it is a temporary work authorization that, depending on your field of study, you can work in the US for 1 to 3 years. These tend to be well-paid positions, and I know many students that rely on them. They're able to get a job in the US and start their career in the US. Now keep in mind, when you're going for a visa, you're going for a student visa, not a work visa. So this is not something that is intended for a lifelong career, but it will give you some opportunity to make money after you've graduated in the US, and that can help fund your education as well, ultimately. Okay. Perla, you want to mention those things in Spanish real quick?
So las regulaciones federales solo permiten que los estudiantes internacionales trabajen en la universidad. Los estudiantes pueden trabajar un máximo de 20 horas a la semana. El pago promedio es de 8 a 15 dólares a la hora. Y también hay otras oportunidades de pasantías pagadas o sin pagar para los estudiantes que quieren agarrar experiencia. Y existe la CPT y OPT. Y OPT es una autorización de empleo temporal con un trabajo y es medio de sus estudios durante 1 a 3 años que los estudiantes pueden trabajar en los Estados Unidos.
Great. Thank you, Perla. And so that sort of hopefully was a good overview for everyone of the various opportunities that are out there available for you to finance your graduate school education. I'll be happy to answer any questions. EducationUSA is graciously allowed us here to just talk a little bit about our particular institution. The name of our school is Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. We go by the acronym SIUE. We've got about 13,000 students. 400 of those are international. We have a beautiful, beautiful campus. It's very large. 2,600 acres, which is about 10 square kilometers large. It's got a lot of nature around it. And it's in the suburb of a city called St. Louis. We're about 4 hours south of Chicago and outside a relatively large city of about 2.5 million people called St. Louis. So being in the suburbs, it's a nice, safe, we are always ranked as one of the safest institutions in the US, which is great, but we also have access to many cultural activities that St. Louis has to offer. Next slide, please. We have 7 different schools, so I have those listed there, and over 60 different graduate programs. So obviously I'm not going to name them all, but it's a wide variety from the arts and sciences to business. We do have a school of dental medicine. Education, health, and human behavior are things like public health, nutrition, psychology, those kinds of things all fall under that school. We have a school of engineering, nursing, and pharmacy, so we're pretty strong in the health fields as well. We've gotten some good rankings from Washington Monthly and Forbes because what we really say is we've got very strong academics, but we're very affordable when you compare us to other schools in the US. And the last slide, please. So the last slide just sort of wraps up what I've talked about and what do we offer at SIUE. We think it's a great value for international students. In fact, our GEO, as I said, will be worth somewhere between $13,000 and $20,000, depending on the length of your program. And that is awarded. We give a lot of GEO awards out. You only need to have a minimum GPA to earn it. About a third of our students receive graduate assistantships, which is very high. Especially, we give out a lot of students with master's programs, we give assistantships, whereas some schools only give them to doctoral programs. And then 90% of the students that want to go on that and have that OPT experience are able to find a position in the US. So our degrees are valued by the employers in the area. So if you'd like more information, I encourage you to go to siue.edu/more. It'll allow you to put in your name and email address and what program you're interested in, and we'll get back to you right away. If you'd prefer, you can also email us, and there's the email address for international admissions, intladm@siue.edu. But if you go to that siue.edu more page, we'll be happy to get back to you and provide you with lots of information. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Elvira is gonna read the questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, we have some questions here. So the first one, are there any recommended web pages to look up cost of living of campus?
Cost of living of various campuses. I'll be honest with you, I do not know of a specific website that will give you a good way to sort of divide out those. That's why, you kind of got to rely on I-20s. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. Yes, there are costs of living guides published in the US where you can put the city in and see how expensive it is. Yeah, I'm sorry, I wish I could give you a better answer on that one. I will tell you though, it's very clear. I know a lot of students are attracted, and I don't blame them. They want to go to New York City, they want to go to Miami, they want to go to LA or something. Those are going to be very high cost of living cities, all right? So if you are willing to go more into the interior of the US, in the middle part of the country, your costs generally tend to be much lower than the costs on the coasts. I'm sorry that I don't have a specific guide for you though.
Well, we have more questions, and the next one is, do you have financial aid for virtual graduate programs? Somebody else also asked, are there scholarships available for online programs?
For online programs, yes. I mean, our scholarships, it doesn't matter if they're online. So many programs are going online or having a large online component. All our scholarships, it doesn't matter whether you go online or in person. Now, there are some immigration rules about whether or not you can come to the US and study in an online program. You may have to do that online program if it's entirely online from your home country. Now, those rules have been relaxed a little bit because of COVID, but I would guess once this is passed that it will go back, that if it's fully online, you're not going to be able to get a visa to come to the US. But as far as scholarships go, usually that doesn't impact. It's just, if you get into the program, you have the academic grades, you get the scholarship. Simple as that. And I'm sorry, I missed the first question. Was it also about online, or was it?
Yeah, virtual graduate programs. So financial aid for, yeah. So yeah. So yeah, the next question, what is the order of this process? And I guess applying for the scholarship. And he asks, I mean, if I want to apply, but I do not have all that money, but I consider I am eligible for a scholarship, what do I have to do, or how should I apply?
Okay. First of all, I feel very strongly about this, and I know many of my colleagues at different universities do as well. Financial being able to finance your education is entirely different from being admitted to a university, okay? The university is going to admit you based on your academic record, okay? Not how much money you have, and it should always be that way. Same thing, you know, the scholarship, if it's an academic scholarship, is going to be awarded based on how strong your academics are. So I encourage you to apply to an institution first, you know, and then apply for the scholarships, okay? Because if the university wants you, then they may open up some different avenues for you to get those scholarships. So the first step is always to apply. Now I know there are application fees, sometimes those can be waived. Work with EducationUSA and they can help you out with that so that there are not so many upfront costs. But then you can look at these various opportunities to get scholarships, to get an assistantship. But so many times people think they have to have everything ready and have to be applying for their assistantship along with their application to the university. And it just doesn't tend to work that way. You have to get accepted first, and then they pick from the pool of accepted students to give those assistantships, to give those scholarships. That's where you need to start. And once you've achieved that acceptance, then you can look at the various forms of aid that are available.
Thank you. The next question is from Francisco. I am currently engaged, congratulations. And one of the discussions that we have come up with is if we should move together to the US during my graduate studies. Besides an increment in living expenses, are there any other important things we should consider to make our decision? I also have a question related to that. Are there any aids for family dependents in graduate school?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. So as far as your fiance coming, so you get a student visa, usually an F1 visa. Sometimes it's a J visa, but the typical one is an F visa. Spouses and children can come as your dependents to the US. I don't think that a fiance would qualify though. So if you're not married, your fiance would have to get their own I-20 and get their own visa to come to the US, okay? Now, if you get married in advance, then of course you can bring spouses and children with you during your study. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Yes, obviously living expenses are going to be cheaper if it's shared than you know, just living on your own. One thing I know our university does, and many universities do, not just the universities, but honestly, the students that are there, the international students always help each other. They'll help you find living arrangements that are affordable. They may, you know, be willing to help you find a roommate in the US, those kinds of things. So that is something to keep in mind. As far as scholarships, we do have, for example, SIUE has a legacy scholarship that if your parent went to school or an immediate family member went to school here, we will give you the domestic rate. So we'll lower your tuition rate from the international to the domestic. Now, that doesn't necessarily work for your husband or wife while you're going to school. That's not how it works. Someone has to graduate first, and then the next person will get that scholarship. So they're really going to be, you know, if you're planning on both attending school at the same time, you're going to have to find your own scholarships and those kinds of things. But hopefully that helped out. So.
Thank you. And the next question. If I were to get a research assistantship or teaching assistantship, how many hours a week could I be working? Does it follow the 20 hours rule?
Yes, 20 hours is very typical. We have some 10-hour research assistantships, but normally it's 20. So, and the way this comes, just to give you some background, a typical work week in the US is considered 40 hours. You work 5 8-hour days. It's a 40-hour day. Because you are working and going to school, basically you're supposed to do half time for each is the idea. You may spend more time on your schooling than 20 hours a week, but you do have to usually work in a lab or with teaching. It's usually a 20-hour-a-week commitment. Like I said, sometimes we give some 10-hour assistantships, but those are usually a lower dollar amount. So you're not going to get as big a stipend. You may not get the full amount tuition reimbursement. So that it's much more common that you get a 20-hour-a-week position, and that's what you'll be expected to work.
Thank you. When should I expect to have news about my acceptance into a graduate program?
That can really vary, okay? I will tell you at our institution, it totally depends on the program. And this is probably typical for a lot of institutions. So we have, for example, a very competitive psychology program. Very good graduate program in psychology, clinical psychology, child psychology. That program has a January 15th deadline to apply. So you must have all your applications in by then. They go through a rigorous screening process. They gather all the finalists together. With internationals, you can usually do it virtually. And they then announce all the students that are going to be in the next cohort, usually at the end of March, right? So it takes them about 2 months for them to figure out which students are going to be accepted into their program. And it is one time they notify all their students at the same time. Competitive programs tend to work a little more in that way. We also have programs, though, that have rolling admissions. So our engineering programs, for example, they turn around decisions very quickly. We have about a 5-day turnaround time from when you submit all your documents to when you get an answer from the engineering program, because they are simply accepting you. Either they're going to accept you or reject you at any time for the next semester. So, you know, our international admissions closed, but typically, you know, we worked all the way up until July 1st to accept applications, and we turned around an answer within 5 days, and then students went out and got their I-20. So I know that's not a very clear answer, but that's the types of variety and the types of extremes that you're going to see. So you may want to ask them, is there rolling admissions or is it a specific date? And usually the department's pretty upfront with telling you how that will happen.
Thank you. We have other 2 related questions. One says, is it possible to combine 2 or more sources of financial aid? Is it possible to have both a scholarship and an assistantship simultaneously?
So it is, however, keep in mind, an assistantship, for example, provides a tuition waiver. Some of our scholarships also provide a tuition waiver, or our GEO award, for example, is a reduction in your tuition. Well, if you get an assistantship and your tuition is waived, then you don't need that scholarship, because the scholarship isn't you can't use the scholarship for anything but tuition. So it's going to depend on the terms of the scholarship and the terms of the assistantship. If the scholarship says this is for tuition and you already have a tuition waiver from another source, like a graduate assistantship, you can't take that scholarship money and use it for your housing, for example. So it's going to depend. That's one of the things you're going to have to look very carefully at that scholarship that you get. What is it allowed? What can you use it for? Okay, and that's going to be the determination. If, however, though, you can get 2 partial scholarships, for example. Maybe you got a scholarship from a nonprofit organization that gave you $5,000 to use towards your graduate schooling, and we gave you a GEO award, which gives you 50% off your tuition. You can use both of those and use them together. So that's all you have to do, is watch that if you get an assistantship and those kinds of things, that if one waives it, that's gonna not allow you to do the other.
Okay, thank you. Next question. To find a specific assistantship according to my program, do I have to seek at the university? Do assistantships apply for all kinds of programs, undergraduate and graduate programs?
Assistantships are generally only graduate programs. There are not, you can't get an assistantship for undergraduate program for a bachelor's degree. That's not allowed. But almost all graduate programs will have some assistantships. Now, the programs that have more tend to be the programs that do more research. So if you've got a school of engineering or chemistry, you know, some of those STEM fields, they're getting grants to do research and they need more people to help them in the field. Teaching assistantships tend to be more common in the arts and the humanities, the social sciences, where they need help teaching the undergraduate students. So, you know, so you've got to, you know, those are the different kinds of places that you're going to find them. But you'll see assistantships across the whole university, and in general, at most larger universities, they will be available. Did I answer the question? I got a little distracted. Hopefully I did.
Yeah, I think you did. So the next question, it's also someone from the art field. Do you know any pages, searches for graduate art scholarships? I was accepted in the School of Art Institute of Chicago, a top art graduate program, but I didn't get a scholarship. Do you have any tips for my next year application?
That's a tough one. I don't have any specific sources that come to mind for pure arts. But I guess what I would encourage you to do is try to look for maybe some nonprofit organizations that either provide money to the arts, an arts foundation or something like that. That is one possibility. But another possibility that you want to think of is some kind of service. So for example, we have a program in art therapy, all right? And what it does is it uses art to help either children express themselves or maybe someone who is recovering in the hospital, and they use art in that way. And the arts tend to be, you know, focused in areas that do the community, do good service towards the community. So you may be able to find an organization that has a service type scholarship available that you can say, hey, art is my strength. I'd like to use my art to serve the community. And if I did that, you know, if you're saying in Chicago, you know, is there something, some organization that uses arts to help children in low-income neighborhoods or something like that? You know, you're essentially volunteering your time and your skills as an artist, and in exchange, they may help you out with your education. So I wish I had a specific one, but off the top of my head, I don't. But that's really where I'd encourage you to look, is through nonprofit organizations.
Thank you. The next question, how realistic is it if a professor whom I have met during fieldwork offers me work in his research team? What is the best way to go about this scenario?
So if I heard that correctly, you meet a professor and he wants you to help, or she to help them with their research. What's the best way?
How likely will that happen? If I met a professor whom I met during field work, is it possible that he offers work in his research team?
Yes, I mean, if they're doing research, that's a great lead. I would definitely reach out to that individual and, you know, let them know how much you enjoyed being out in the field with them, doing the research, that it's just the kind of thing that you'd like to do in the future. That's an excellent way of doing it. What I always tell people, tell students, you know, and I understand this, they want that assistantship before they can come, but if you can come to the US, if you can find a way to afford your first semester, your first year of education, I know so many professors that hire students in their second semester or their second year of studies in their labs, helping them teach. Why? Because they've come to the university, they've seen what that student can do, right? When you're just showing yourself on paper in an application, it's a little hard to know if you're dependable, if you're going to show up on time, if you're a hard worker, those kinds of things. Whereas when they come on campus and they see this student who is engaged in the classroom and always shows up on time and comes and asks, they go, I like this student. I can see this student is really going to be helpful to me in my lab and in my work. And so they give them an assistantship afterwards. So if you've met someone doing field work or something, that's a great way for you to make that connection and find that opportunity to get a research assistantship. So, you know, I do encourage people to reach out to those individual professors and explain to them that they really want to, and if there's any opportunity that you're really interested in working with them.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions. Is it possible to get a scholarship as international student if I have American and Mexican nationality?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's more that different scholarships will have a restriction. So there may be a scholarship that only US citizens are able to get. For example, we have what's called a Cougar Pride Scholarship. We're a state university. The money for that scholarship comes directly from the state government. So the state government is trying to support the families that live in the state and are paying taxes to the state. So that scholarship's only open to domestic students. There might be other scholarships though. Actually, we do have a DREAMIAC scholarship that is specifically to increase our international student population on campus. So it's only open to international students. So if you have both passports, you have more opportunities, I would say. So yeah, definitely that should never prevent you from getting a scholarship.
Thank you. And the last question, what are the fields of study that allowed a 3-year OPT?
3-year OPT? Those are STEM fields. It's a STEM field extension. So all OPTs, all students that earn a degree from the US are allowed to go on 1 year of OPT. If you're in a STEM field, so that's science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, you can apply for a 2-year extension. So all the computer science, all the engineering, hard sciences like chemistry, biology, all of those kinds of things, computer management and information systems in the business school, as long as it has a STEM designation, they get those extra 2 years of OPT.
Thank you. That was the last question. I only have some thank you notes. People saying that your presentation was great. So we really thank your presentation and Perla's translations. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Dr. Donahan and Monahan and Perla, thank you very much for accepting to join us for the Education USA regional webinars. I'm sure that all participants, as they have expressed, have learned a lot from your presentation. I would also like to thank all the advisors that have been working behind the scenes to make this possible. And a reminder to our participants, quick reminder, if you have any questions or doubts, or if you want to participate in future events, don't forget to contact your Education USA advising office. You can find all the information about our offices in our website, which is in the slide that you're looking at now. And I think that's all for today. Thank you very much.